And welcome back on a cool Thursday morning. Great conversation. Open your eyes. That's where we are as we speak. Our second segment is, of course, extremely interesting as well, as we'll be talking about pesticides control. It is extremely important you know how to manage your pesticides. In with us this morning is none other than Ginnel Ozaeta, technical officer, and Nonato Canto. I like that. Nonato Canto, senior technical assistant, Pesticides Control Board. Guys, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
On this lovely morning, you know, it's extremely important when it comes to pesticides. A lot of folks don't know how to use them, when to use them, how to manage yourself using your pesticides. Let's talk a little about the Pesticides Control Board and how you guys are educating Belizeans on how to use pesticides.
Okay,
Mr. Canto.
Good morning. Yes, the Pesticides Control Board is a statutory body that comes under the Ministry of Agriculture, and it deals with the importation, distribution, storage, disposal of pesticides in Belize. And since 1989, when it came into effect, we have been conducting training, monitoring, inspection throughout the country of Belize when it comes to any aspects of pesticide management. And one of the main objectives of the board is the training. When it comes to training of farmers in the rational use of pesticides, now it is shifting towards responsible use instead of rational use. So we do a lot of training to farmers, to all stakeholders when it comes to pesticide management in the country.
Okay.
Now, it is Pesticide Awareness Week.
Yes.
And I like the opportunity to have you here for the simple fact that we don't always think about the role of the Pesticide Control Board and what you do in terms of protecting the health and the integrity of not just the people in the country, but even when you're talking about produce and uses and even what's allowed in the country.
Yes.
How do you work in terms of keeping the public education going? What is the most important aspect of your public education coming out of the control board?
The Pesticides Control Board, it's split in 2 units. We like to think about it that way. We have the registration unit and the post-registration unit. That Mr. Canto is the head of the post-registration unit. Him and the other 4 technicians, they do school visits, they train the farmers if they need to, because they're restricted use pesticides and then they are general use pesticides. So in the event that someone needs to use a restricted use pesticides, Mr. Canto and the other technicians, they host different training sessions, and a farmer has to attend these sessions prior to him going to the store to purchase one of those pesticides. And they also do a lot of school activities, and especially with the schools that are around farming areas mostly. And presently, today, the guys are out giving out our managed pesticides responsibly and adapt to climate change presentation to all the schools. Yesterday, Mr. Canto was at Belize Rural High School. So the country is divided into zones. So then each guy has his zone, and they try to do as much as possible outreach in the schools, the farming community, and so forth.
Because it's the week going on, we've got this week going on. Today is Thursday.
Yes.
For a lot of folks, hey, hip hip hooray. Marlene told me this morning, September is out. But talk to us about some of the activities we've done throughout this week and what do we have lined up to the end of the week.
Okay, so yesterday we had the technicians out in the different schools, and our Zone 1 technician was on Esteria Moore. He was promoting the Pesticides Awareness Week as well. Monday was a holiday, so he cut the week short.
Shortened celebration.
But on Tuesday we had an open day at the Secretariat in Central Farm, and we invited all the farming communities, the primary schools around there, and everyone in Central Farm was invited as well. We had a presentation to them. We showed different video clips of the World Food Day and how agriculture is very important and where our food comes from and all of those things. And we had different snacks and refreshments, so that was good. We have a Facebook page, so it's all on there. So if you want to know more about it, it's being updated regularly. So you can go like the page and see what we're doing.
Probably I could contribute to that. Apart from just the activities that we have, it's a continuous process. We have been going to targeting, especially like school children, and not only school children, but we target any stakeholders that are involved with the management of pesticides, especially on the large farms, in the banana industry, the sugar industry. Our presence is there, and we try to pass this information to as much of the population as possible to be aware of how they manage pesticides.
Yes.
And that is what our main objective is, so that everybody, even not only through training, we do TV ads. We have other forms of how we promote the Pesticides Control Board.
What are some of the I'm so sorry to cut you off, but what are some of the most used pesticides in Belize? And can anybody just pick up a bottle of malathion and decide to say, you know what, I'm just going to spray this? Talk to us about that.
Well, actually, as Ginnel mentioned, there are categorized. We have the restricted use and the general use pesticides. And when it comes to the restricted pesticides, that is where there is a legislation whereby any user have to undergo a training, get a license to buy a restricted pesticides. And then on the other hand, there is the general use pesticides, where you could go to any of the pesticide outlet, authorized or licensed outlets throughout the country, where they could be able to buy a general use pesticide. Now, you talk about one of the most used pesticides in Belize. It's glyphosate.
Okay.
Which is the most commonly used.
Glyphosate?
Glyphosate. It's a herbicide.
Well, it's a herbicide
that is used.
It's worldwide. Herbicides are the most common used pesticide, you know, and it goes back to what Mr. Canto is saying, that each year we have the CGPC group meet in on June, and that's a coordinating group of Caribbean control board pesticide control boards, and they choose a team to work out throughout the year. Like last year we had Protect Children from Pesticides, so all our team and our concentration was all throughout that year. It was around that specific topic or theme, you know. This year it's Manage Pesticides, Adapt to Climate Change, and it fits so wonderful in the World Food Day theme, which is climate is changing, food and agriculture must too, because it goes back to every little thing that we do. Sometimes we don't think about it, but we're contributing to that climate change, you know. And for example, right now in the world, herbicides are the most common use, but because of climate change, that might change to insecticides, fungicides that are more commonly used, because as temperatures rise, the moisture in the atmosphere increases. So then we have these pesticides that are being used. Some of them might not be able to act on the ground or on the food, and they vaporize. If they vaporize, then they move over to more template regions, and it's like a grasshopper effect, because then it reaches the ice caps, it then precipitates, but then it goes back into the water, and water circulates, and water it travels all around the world, and it goes back to something that you look at this water, and because it's clear, you think that it's healthy, you know, but that's not the whole chemistry behind it, because we don't know what it is. So then it's simple little things, as for example, it goes back to what we always say: we have our food and we eat our plate of rice and beans and apples and grapes and so forth, but we never know or we never think about what the food chain, how did it get here, you know? So we're always promoting grow locally, buy locally, shop locally, because as our technicians always say, if you purchase an apple compared to if you purchase an orange, what measures or what transportation was to get this apple here into Belize, because Belize doesn't grow apples. So all the emissions and so forth, that contributes to climate change, as opposed to if we buy locally and grow locally and eat locally.
Yeah.
In educating, in educating people when it comes to the pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, there's a certain level, because we are mentioning of what we consume, right? And in educating folks on pesticides or herbicides or fungicides, there are always different colors, because, and we notice these colors. What are these colors for? And I ask this because this is very important, so folks should know that when you see this is the level of
toxicity.
Yes.
So that is one of classification of pesticides that is with the World Health Organization.
Okay.
So those what we call color bands on the pesticide label. In fact, by law, all pesticides should have a label and a pamphlet attached to it, and the label should have one of those color bands. I think you know one of them or four of them. It has 4 color bands. In fact, 5, but 4 is red, yellow, blue, and green.
What do they mean?
Red meaning is
It's
extremely
extremely
hazardous.
dangerous.
It's 1A, extremely hazardous. Then 1B, highly hazardous, until it goes to green, which is the lowest.
The lowest,
of
yes.
toxicity. But that doesn't mean that it won't harm you.
Yes.
That color band is just to indicate
The level
to you, the user, how toxic that pesticide is, so that if a farmer wants to, well, actually in our training program we always encourage, recommend farmers, if they want to use pesticides, to use a pesticide that with a green color band label.
Yeah.
Along with their personal protective equipment.
Yeah.
Yes, because we know that even the weather contributes to how you use a pesticide.
Yes.
The weather contributes to this. So as a farmer, if the wind is blowing from the north or from the east, then that individual is supposed to be standing on another side so as to not get in contact with what. Yes. Another question for I'm just loving this. Another question for you: where would you rate an insecticide such as Baygon?
Baygon is classified as an aerosol.
And it's domestic
It's
use.
a domestic use pesticides, and you rate it as to toxicity. You mean it doesn't have a color band because of a domestic use pesticides, and most aerosols are pyrethroids. It's a chemical family of pesticides which comes from plants, pyrethrins and stuff like that. But you have to handle it as
here,
any
as
other
yeah.
pesticides that
As
are used
a matter of
in
fact, the
agriculture.
guys, they usually go into the stores and they check where these Baygons and stuff are stored. They're supposed to be away from food and so forth. They're the ones that
And similarly in your home, you'd want to keep it the same way.
Exactly.
Now, key to this week's celebration is looking at how climate change changes, how what was typically done needs to adapt to a changing environment. When it comes to pesticide use, there are 2 things. One, it's looking at how climate change impacts how we use pesticides.
Yeah.
And I think, Ginnel, you gave a great example of just looking at how the temperatures change, but also we're seeing the introduction of bugs, perhaps that are more resistant, pests that never used to be as large an issue as before. Let's talk about some of the clear impacts that we've seen in Belize, where the Pesticide Control Board also has to participate in terms of assisting, especially with farmers.
It's one of the challenges that we have to face with climate change is the probably resurgence of pests, or probably at some point an organism that was not a pest now might be a pest later on because of climate change. We have the extended dry weather. Pests could adapt to that. Different pests could adapt to this climate change. Now that is where the farmers have to adapt to these changes. They have to make sure that their management of pests are more sustainable on the longer run, because if pests are becoming more resistant, then manufacturers of pesticides have to develop new active ingredients. And when it comes to new active ingredient, it could be probably they are more toxic to humans. They could contaminate the environment. Things like those with that we have to look or to face on the longer run, especially when it comes to pests, though, because they might adapt to climate change, and then farmers have to find a way how to mitigate.
Like what I said earlier, right at presently herbicides are mostly used, but because of these rising temperatures, for example, a fungus, they like moisture, they like high temperatures, and if we have high temperatures, then we have more moisture. So then if we have more rain, there's more water in the atmosphere, a higher humidity.
It's a better environment.
It's a better environment. So in the event that these fungus might have not been a problem before, but because of all the rain and then the different climate changes, and then it would then become a problem. And as opposed to probably you didn't need to use a fungicide for that specific crop, but now there's the need for it. But it's like what the guys say and what they always say in their training, that we need to do or use pesticides as a last resort. It's always about looking what you can do before that, because there are plants, there are barriers, there are ways that you can reduce the pest problem without the use of pesticides. So in the event that then you cannot use that, then you resort to that. It's always as the last option. That's what they always promote.
Now, the second point I wanted to talk about was also when we talk about food security, or even we talk about consumption in general. The world is moving towards this organic trend. And in Belize, we've been organic for a while. But one of the things that we know, and especially when you travel in more developed countries, is that people question, what pesticides are their produce exposed to? And it's not something that we ask about very often in the local context. But let's do a recap from your end. When we receive our fresh produce from the markets, for example, what's the input of the Pesticide Control Board? What are our farmers actually using, and who regulates to ensure that it will be completely healthy for the consumers?
Okay. About three to 4 years ago, we started a program we called the Good Pesticide Management Practices, which was a very innovative program where we involved farmers, which were the main stakeholders when it comes to food production, especially small farmers that produce vegetables, fresh vegetables to the market.
Local market.
And where we train farmers to handle pesticides in a more responsible way, and especially when it comes to record keeping. Record keeping, which is one of the small farmers is not much accustomed to, and at the end we took samples from their farm and we tested them, and through the program then we saw that the residues in this produce is not alarming. because of the involvement of the different stakeholders. We have the extension department, we have BAHA, we have Pesticides Control Board, which was very good because farmers saw the advantage of these recommendations. So they adapted to this program, but however that is not the end, because when it comes to food security we have to think about a continuous follow-up program to do, so that we have a system in place where these programs continue, and on our side we recommend what we call a pre-harvest interval, which is very important. Most pesticides, especially insecticides, have a pre-harvest interval on their label, and that is we emphasize a lot on our training program, so that farmers follow the pre-harvest interval of those pesticides, so that when they harvest, it doesn't contain any pesticide residues.
Okay.
At a low
concentration.
concentration or percentage.
And because what happened, we don't have the BAHA have a lab, but it's only limited to when it comes to analysis of pesticide residues. The Taiwanese mission started a program to do an on-farm analysis, which is not into effect right now, but it's a good program, whereby we try to encourage farmers to practice or to manage pesticide.
If you could inform the public, and we're quickly running out of time, so I want you to be able to pass on a bit of education. I think those in the agricultural sector are fully aware of the Pesticide Control Board, your role, and the work that you do. To the wider public, perhaps not as much, but the work you do directly impacts what we eat and the exposure that we have. If you could pass on information that you think is most relevant to the public in terms of, I know sometimes some people overuse pesticides. Some people go to the store and say, why can't I have access to X, Y, and Z? What would you like to perhaps clarify, inform for the general wider public about pesticide use and pesticide control?
Well, it's like what Mr. Canto said, each pesticide comes with a label and a pamphlet.
Yeah.
Whenever you're purchasing these, always remember that there are other ways to combat pest problems.
Yeah.
Think about using pesticide as your last option, And when you do need to use the pesticide, the pamphlet is your Bible. That will instruct you, tell you everything you need to know about it, how to use it, and so forth, But it goes back to our team this year that says adapt to climate change. It's like going to market locally or trying to purchase. We tend to want to buy the prettiest fruit or the prettiest tomato and so forth, But we have to be conscious that if the prettier it is, the more chemicals it has. So, think about trying to buy.
Isn't so bad after all.
No, and it's just the simple things that we do as individuals that we think, or to reduce our ecological footprint, so that then we can mitigate climate change, So, for example, like eating leftovers, some of us don't like to, and then we throw away these food that contribute to the greenhouse gases and so forth. So, if you have, or if you pack lunches, eat your leftovers, love your leftovers. That's
a simple thing we don't think about.
Yes,
You're right.
So we don't
and
think about
if you're a person that uses your vehicle to go to the shop, then walk buy a bike maybe or ride a bike and use public transport more often.
Yeah.
So those are all the ways we as individuals, as Belizeans, can reduce our ecological footprint and help combat climate change, which in that case then if we help combat climate change, then our food and agriculture can adapt better. It's always promoting, like the FAO promotes climate smart agriculture. We need to know what are the changes, and each country, each region will be different because of the different geographical area that we're at. So each farmer will need to know what to do, how to adapt, and so forth.
All right.
I would just add one more thing. Probably one of the things that a lot of us could practice is, as farmers, are the integrated pest management, which will reduce the use of chemicals when it comes to food production or food safety.
All right. Well, I want to say thank you for joining us this morning. As I mentioned, we don't always think about the work of the Pesticide Control Board, but the work that they do directly impacts us every single day. So thank you for coming in and sharing this information.
And we'll
with
be
us.
tomorrow out at the World Food Day.
That's right. That's at the Agricultural Fairgrounds for the commemoration of World Food Day. We're going to go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we'll be joined by youth activist William Muller talking about a brand new youth initiative called Highlighting Youth. So stay tuned.